So after my break, I made sure I never focus on numbers ever again.
I mentioned the Sidemen boys, I'm gonna get more subscribers than Sidemen. And I'm also gonna get more views than Sidemen.
If you had told KSI 10 years ago that one day millions of people would be accusing him of becoming everything he used to make fun of, he probably would have laughed in your face. Because back then, KSI wasn't just another YouTuber. He was the guy calling everyone out.
Jake Paul, Logan Paul.
The guy making fun of fake personalities. The guy who built his reputation on saying whatever he wanted, regardless of who got offended. The guy who represented the average viewer more than the average celebrity. And that's exactly why so many people connected with him. People didn't watch KSI because he was polished. They watched him because he wasn't. He felt authentic. But fast forward to today, and a growing number of fans are asking a question they never thought they'd ask. What happened? Now, before people start typing angry comments, this isn't about saying KSI is a bad person. It's about something much more interesting. It's about how success changes people. Because if you look at KSI's career, the transformation is honestly incredible. He went from recording videos in his room to becoming one of the biggest internet personalities on the planet. Music, boxing, businesses, millions of followers, massive influence. He's achieved more than almost any creator could ever dream of. But sometimes the things that make someone successful are the exact things that slowly pull them away from what made people love them in the first place. And that's where a lot of the criticism comes from. Think about old KSI for a second. The old KSI would have absolutely roasted influencers who constantly pushed products. The old KSI would have laughed at creators getting involved in endless internet drama. The old KSI would have mocked people who seemed obsessed with protecting their image. That was his whole brand. He was the guy pointing at everyone else's nonsense. Now suddenly he's one of the biggest brands on the internet himself. And whether it's prime controversies, social media arguments, public feuds, reactions to criticism, or business decisions, many fans feel like he's become part of the exact system he used to criticize. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. But here's where things get complicated. Because is that actually hypocrisy? Or is that just reality? It's easy to criticize influencers when you're not one. It's easy to make fun of huge brands when you don't own one. It's easy to say you'd never do certain things when you've never had millions of people watching your every move. The truth is, most people never experience that level of fame. Most people never have businesses worth millions attached to their name. Most people never have headlines written about them every week. So maybe the real question isn't whether KSI changed. Of course he changed. Anybody would. The real question is whether he changed too much. And that's what fans seem divided on. Some people look at KSI and see a guy who grew up, a guy who expanded beyond YouTube, a guy who turned internet fame into a legitimate empire. Others look at him and see someone who lost the authenticity that made him special, someone who became more focused on protecting the brand than speaking his mind, someone who feels less like KSI and more like a corporation. And honestly, both sides have points. Because when you've been on the internet as long as KSI has, change is inevitable. The version of him from 2014 was never going to survive unchanged into 2026. That's just not how life works. People mature, priorities shift, responsibilities increase, the audience changes, the platform changes, everything changes. The problem is that audiences often want creators to stay exactly the same forever. But creators want to evolve, and eventually those two things collide. That's what we're seeing now, not just with KSI. With almost every creator who's been around for over a decade, the rebellious outsider eventually becomes the establishment. The underdog eventually becomes the giant. The person calling out the system eventually becomes part of the system. And once that happens, people start holding them to the same standards they once used against others. That's why the criticism hits harder. Because it comes with receipts. People can literally pull up old clips and compare them to what's happening now. And whether that's fair or unfair, that's the reality of being a public figure in the internet age. Everything is documented. Everything is remembered. Everything can be compared. At the end of the day, I don't think the story of KSI is really about hypocrisy. I think it's about transformation. The KSI people fell in love with was a hungry creator trying to make it. The KSI we see today is a businessman, entertainer, athlete, and global brand. Those are two completely different people living two completely different lives. The reason so many fans are frustrated isn't necessarily because KSI changed. It's because they miss what he used to represent. And maybe that's the hardest part of success. The bigger you become, the harder it is to stay connected to the person you used to be. Whether you think KSI evolved, sold out, matured, or simply adapted to his circumstances, one thing is undeniable. The guy who once made videos roasting the internet has become one of the internet's biggest institutions. And for better or worse, that's exactly why the conversation around him has changed.